this is supposed to be Dr. Fauci and Representative Jim Jordan, and 2.7 million views. This is from his account, but the video's from Benny, which I think he's like the Turning Point guy. Yeah, he's the Turning Point guy. He's the guy in the suit and the glasses. Can't go to church, can't go to work, can't go to school. Even Dr. Fauci says protesting is dangerous, but Democrats encourage people to riot and protest in the streets. Seems pretty solid. It's only about a few minutes. So I'll probably go over this and, wrap it up and go over some of the other stuff later. So this is Jim Jordan versus Fauci. Let me change that title. I'll probably work on a video later tonight so I could have something to come out for you guys tomorrow. So, all right, so we have Jim Jordan versus Dr. Anthony Fauci. I'm assuming that this exchange is going to cover protests and whatnot. So it's interesting to see what Fauci's perspective on this, because, there's been a lot of attempts to make him a political figure, a lot of them that I don't agree with from the Trump administration. But, the media's really been hyping the divide between Fauci and the Trump administration. So let's see what Jim Jordan, who is like a Trump guy, has to say about this. Okay, I tried to hit play, but it didn't work.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci.
It would be beneficial for me to have my headphones in so I could actually hear the audio that I'm expected to react to. Production value, guys.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Do protests increase the spread of the virus? I think I can make a general statement.
Well, 500,000 protesters on June 6th alone.
Yeah.
I'm just asking that number of people. Does
Yeah.
it increase the spread of the virus?
Crowding together, particularly when you're not wearing a mask, contributes to the spread of the virus.
Should we limit the protesting?
I'm not sure what you mean. How do we say limit the protesting?
Is he saying like through, obviously through the Constitution, there's limits on what the government can do when it comes to the protests. But the question is medically, which is how Jordan should have framed it. Should we limit the protesting? So, yeah, let's. I feel like Fauci's not going to answer this because,
Government limit the protesting.
I don't think that's relevant to.
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus, I'm just asking, should we limit it?
Well, I'm not in a position to determine what the government can do in a forceful way.
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything you can imagine. I'm just asking you. You just said that protests increase the spread. I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I can tell you.
Yeah, he does make a bunch of recommendations about whether or not we should open the economy and all that. So this is a dodge by Fauci. Obviously, Jim Jordan is coming at him really aggressive. Like, that can be seen clearly. Like, the memo's out among a lot of Trumpers that Fauci is more believed, more trusted, more listened to than Jim Jordan. So this is like I'm not Jim Jordan, then Trump. So he's trying to get him to either say that they should limit the protests so he could have a win on the Democrats, or not say it so he can have a win on Fauci. So it's an interesting strategy. And again, I'm not judging this morally and all that. I think it's ridiculous that medical professionals told people that were protesting in their cars, social distancing, like literally in your cars, you're not contacting anybody, that they're protesting the end of their livelihood, not hurting anyone, that they're spreading the virus and they're going to lead to killing people. But then you have thousands of people like clustered together, forming autonomous zones, and all of a sudden the virus is like all, neither here nor there.
Government stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah.
Last week in the Calvary Chapel case, 5 liberals on the Supreme Court said it was okay for Nevada to limit church services.
Yeah.
Should we limit the protesting?
I, I, I don't think that's relevant to.
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus, I'm just asking, should we limit it?
I, I don't think that's relevant to.
Justice Gorsuch said it best. He said, there's no world in which the Constitution permits Nevada to favor Caesar's Palace over Calvary Chapel. I'm just asking, is there a world where the Constitution says you can favor one First Amendment liberty, protesting, over another, practicing your faith?
I'm not favoring anybody over anybody. I'm just making a statement that's a broad statement that avoid crowds of any type, no matter where you are, because that leads to the acquisition and transmission. And I don't judge one crowd versus another crowd. When you're in a crowd, particularly if you're not wearing a mask, that induces the spread.
It's a simple question.
So, I mean, look, if this was the answer we got from medical people, I'm totally on board with it. Like, because in reality, it doesn't matter. Like, it matters how you're protesting in terms of transmission of the virus, right? Like, obviously, protesting in your car is better than out in a giant crowd. You know what I mean? But if this was the message from the medical community, we'd have a lot more trust in the medical community right now. So, yeah, I wish it was. I wish this was what everybody was saying. Let's see. I have a message from Clinton. Ordinary people realize how experts treat the left differently. Yeah, I do think that's a problem. And it's a problem for credibility. Like, set aside partisanship for a second. If the left were, if the medical community were favoring Republican stuff and not Democrat stuff, we'd have the same exact problems. Like, because again, if the virus is the enemy that we all agree on, right? And we have to like reduce the transmission of the virus, it shouldn't matter what activity you're doing that increases the transmission. But if you're picking this activity and not that activity, it becomes ridiculous. So, yeah.
Doctor, should we limit the protests? Government is obviously limiting people going to church. And look, there's been no violence that I can see at church. I haven't seen people during a church service go out and harm police officers or burn buildings. But we know that, I mean, for 63 days, 9 weeks, it's been happening in Portland.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one night in Chicago, 49 officers were injured, but no limit to protests. But boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
What was the?
I don't know how many times I can answer that. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm just going to tell you.
You've opined on a lot of things, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but I've never.
This is something that directly impacts the spread of the virus, and I'm asking your position on the protest.
Yeah.
He should look. Jim Jordan's going hard, right? Because this is what he's doing, right? This is going to get clipped and shared. It's being viewed 2.7 million times. You can see by the counter at the time of me doing this, right? That's what's going on here. But the real question that Jim Jordan should be asking, like, assume that this isn't political, right? It is political. Remember, these are politicians. So even saying it's political is not an insult. It's an acknowledgement of reality. Assuming this isn't political, he should just ask what his medical opinion is about these particular protests. Because, by the way, not all protests are created equal. Like, obviously, no matter what cause you're doing, if you're doing bad behavior, then it's going to lead to transmission of the virus. But again, if BLM were protesting in their cars, like they're pulling up around the Capitol and they're honking, and somebody was saying that they were spreading the virus that way, I would call BS on that, right? That's what people were doing largely in Michigan. There were people who went into the Capitol building, but largely it was the bulk of the protests were people in the cars, right? Like, so that protest is not transmitting the virus in the same way that these massive gatherings are. And by the way, outside transmission is rarer than inside transmission. That is true. But remember, these people were breaking into stores, looting places, fighting each other over technology, like iPads, iMacs, sneakers, stuff like that. So, like, the BLM protesters, just based on that there are more people there, let's keep it real, and that they're less social distancing, also, let's just keep it real. And on top of that, that they're also going into places like narrow entrances when they smash a door or a window. They're going into places and breathing all on top of each other and grabbing stuff, that hasn't been cleaned and all that. They're spreading the viruses more. Like, there's a chart that I always pull up and I throw in my Discord all the time of the Minneapolis infections in the city where the protest started. And wouldn't you know it, like 2 weeks after the riot started, the infection rate between ages 20 and 29, the most likely group of people, young people, to be engaging in these protests and in these riots, spiked dramatically. And then 2 weeks after that, it spiked again. So obviously they're spreading this, but he needs to reframe his question, because right now Fauci can move around the question based on the fact that it's not medical in nature, it's political in nature.
I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm telling you what it is, the danger. And you can make your own conclusion about that. You should stay away from crowds, no matter where the crowds are.
Government has stopped people from going to work. In fact, just in New Jersey 4 days ago, Ian Smith, Frank Trombetta were arrested for opening up, for trying to operate their business, their gym. They were arrested. But my bet is, if these two individuals own this gym were outside just in front of their gym, and all the people who were working out in their gym were outside protesting, they'd been just fine. But because they were in the gym working out, actually running their business, they got arrested. You think that's okay?
See, again, this is a great point to be made. And I would go even further. If these people were outside of the gym and they chucked a brick through it and they were stealing expensive equipment, this would be called a mostly peaceful protest. That's what the media would cover it as, mostly peaceful. It's crazy. So forget about outside protesting in front of your gym. And by the way, again, we have to be honest about what we're talking about. A gym has a bunch of surfaces where the virus lives longer, according to the medical experts. So it is true that being inside the gym is more dangerous, like working out and all that sweat and heavy breathing and all of that is more dangerous than being outside the gym. Let's just be honest about that. And the gym is actually one of the worst examples that Jim Jordan could have brought up. Jim Jordan, hilarious. But we now live in a country where you can be arrested for opening your business, but you can't be arrested for destroying somebody else's. Largely, so to speak. Obviously, there have been some arrests, but that's crazy. But metal, plastic, for the surfaces, by the way, metal, plastic, and rubber are some of the surfaces that the virus just lives on longer. All the gym equipment is metal, plastic, and rubber. All of it. So it's a terrible example. If I'm being 100% honest and as fair as possible. And I actually hope Fauci answers that.
I'm not going to opine on who gets arrested and who does not. I mean, you get where I'm going. I'm telling you, as a public health official, I say crowds.
Do you see the inconsistency, though, Dr. Fauci?
There's no inconsistency, Congressman.
So you're allowed to protest, millions of people on one day in crowds yelling, screaming, but you try to run your business, you get arrested? And if you stood right outside of that same business and protested, you wouldn't get arrested? You don't see an inconsistency there?
I don't understand what you're asking me as a public health official to opine on who should get arrested or not.
All right. So first of all, Fauci said there's no inconsistency there, then rolled it over to public health official. This is what I'm talking about. I never watched this clip before, but I could already tell based on the framing of the question that Fauci would be able to move to, I'm a public health official. I'm not, you're asking me questions that are outside of my purview. So, Jim Jordan's trying really hard to go hard at Fauci here. And, this is a win for his base. People who don't like Fauci will give Jim Jordan money. That's true. But this isn't a win to get Fauci to answer the question that presumably you'd want him to answer. Again, Jim Jordan's a Republican. I'm not going to front, though, and tell you guys what I think you want to hear.
That's not my position. You could ask
you've advocated for certain businesses. You've advocated for certain businesses to be shut down. I'm just asking you on your position on the protest. I haven't seen one. We've heard a lot about hair salons. I haven't seen one hairstylist who, between haircuts, goes out and attacks police or sets something on fire. But we've seen all kinds of that stuff during protests, and we know the protests actually increase the spread of the virus. You've said that.
I said crowds. I didn't say specifically. I didn't say protests do anything.
So the protests don't increase the spread of the virus?
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth.
No, I just want.
All right, so now Fauci's getting a little weaselly. Like, the protests are crowds. Like, this is again specificity. Say, are these protests, these mass crowds? Show the drone footage from LA that everybody was celebrating. Are these likely spreading the virus? And get them to answer yes or no. But again, this is what happens when you're trying to win with your time more than get an answer to your question.
Want an answer to the question: do the protests increase the spread of the virus?
I don't have any scientific evidence that anything. I can tell you that crowds are known, particularly when you don't have a mask, to increase the acquisition and transmission. No matter
So
what.
you don't have a position on whether the protests increase the spread of the virus or don't increase the spread of the virus?
I'm saying that crowds, wherever the crowds are, can give you an increased probability that there's going to be acquisition and transmission.
But do you understand Americans' concern? Protesting, particularly according to the Democrats, is just fine, but you can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't go to church. There's limits placed on all three of those fundamental activities, First Amendment activities, but protesting is just fine.
You know,
yeah, I mean, again, 2.7 million views. This is feeding the niche that obviously people are hoping for, but like people who want to get Fauci, this is feeding that niche. But again, it's not a productive line of questioning. Like, you know, like you got to tailor it. Like Fauci, like the thing is like these public health officials, like, you know, the doctors and scientists, they're nerds. You have to ask them nerd questions. Like he's clearly not trying to answer questions that are going to make him seem like a political figure.
The gentleman's time has expired, but I'll just ask the gentleman to just think about his question and put it in reference to crowds that gather at political meetings, at fundraisers without masks, on an oil rig in Texas, nobody wearing a mask, nobody social distancing, but a fundraiser.
Right.
Would that be problematic? With that, I'll yield 5 minutes to Mr. Foster.
Oh, come on. I assume Jim Jordan did that, right? That's why he's asking the question. But I would actually want to hear Fauci's answer to that, because the whole point of that question is this political? Is the mask mandating political? Yeah. So, yeah, I wish the clip... this is why I hate Twitter videos. They always cut off, you know, before you want them to. Like, you know, Twitter's useless, guys. Like, but yeah, like, I don't think what's his name? I don't think Jim Jordan is like a giant winner in that exchange. You know what I mean? To quote a cringy regressive, this ain't the gotcha you think it is. Yeah, it's just not. It's not great, honestly. Like I'm not impressed. Yeah, like you have to be a little bit smarter in your questions. Like, you know what it is? It's also I'm not a politician, so when I ask a question, I want to get an answer to the question that I'm asking. When these guys ask a question, they want this clip, they want this video. Like that's their goal in this, and like that's not, you know, how I work. So, you know, just looking at this from like an outsider looking in, I'm like, yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. So, yeah, you know, that's really it. So, Depression Gamer Dude followed me. Thank you for the follow. Half Smoke followed me. Thank you for the follow. Rolf Meow Kitten, thank you for the 300 bits. I do appreciate it. That is very dope. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is 100% true. The DC mayor waiving the mask requirements for the John Lewis funeral. Obviously, that is, you know, that's horrible. Again, it shows like the hypocrisy that we're dealing with. Was this? Oh, it was playing muted again. Yeah, it shows like the hypocrisy that we're dealing with. That, you know, especially with the John Lewis funeral, because remember, Herman Cain died, and they criticized Herman Cain for saying that he didn't need to wear a mask. So they criticized this one black guy for dying, for not wearing a mask at a Trump event. But then they do a political event at John Lewis's funeral, and they're all not wearing masks. And to be clear, by the way, for Herman Cain people, you know, obviously it's horrible that he did die. You know, his statements are neither here nor there. It's unfortunate that he was very vocally against the mask and all that, but like the mocking him after he died is horrible. But Cain actually was, I think he became symptomatic within not the correct time period. Like he actually had the virus going into the Trump rally. So it's not that he even got it there, but yeah, it's unfortunate, but it just goes to show you how like that mindset works. It's very much, you know, it's all partisan and it's all disgusting. So